It's gonna be fine.
I know. It's just the deep breath. Get it up.
Just treat it like you'll start recording,
Yep.
which is essentially what you're doing. Fine.
I know. It's just the deep breath. All right. How do I mute this?
I think we're live.
I think we are too, but I can't figure out how to mute us.
We are definitely live. So hello, everyone. I think we have an echo, don't we?
I'm sure we do. I haven't managed to figure out how to mute the regular stream. So I either have to leave and not be able to view the Q&A, or I have to... All right, I'm just going to have to close that. Hello. So I'm Fiona, or Semper Fiona, which is what you'll find if you look for me anywhere in the world. But you can just call me Fiona, it's easier. And I use she, her pronouns. And my co-host Literarian can introduce herself.
Still hear you.
Dang it. Where is the mute button? Rachel, where is the mute button in Excel events?
Bottom right-hand corner, if you hover over the video.
Introduce herself.
Still hear you.
Yeah, I can. Where
It's
is
kind of concealed by the speaker icon, by the Zoom logo rather. But if you click on like the right-hand side of the first O, you can mute it.
Where is
kind of concealed by the speaker icon, by the Zoom logo rather. But if you click on like the right-hand side of the first O, you can mute it.
Maybe I got it.
Where is kind of concealed by the speaker icon?
Seems to be gone.
Good.
At least we know what the delay is.
I'm sorry. Tech, it's a wonderful thing. All right. So at the very top of the chat, I dropped a link to a document which contains some recs and things that we may refer to later on. And then if anybody has questions they would like to ask us, those are in the Q&A tab, which now that I've figured out how to mute, I can actually watch. Also under polls, I have put a short description of a few stories that if we have time, we may choose one of those based on y'all's votes and read it to you. So if people would like to drop over there and vote for the thing they think they might like to listen to. And I think that's all the housekeeping. Did you introduce yourself, Lit?
No, I didn't. I was kind of waiting for the echo to go away. So hello, everyone. Apologies, I'm not on video. I'm very icky about showing my face in public because my professional career doesn't necessarily align well with reading not safe for work content. So you'll have to make do with that. But I'm Literarian. I've recorded Podfic for little more than a year, and you'll find me under this name on pretty much any platform.
Yeah, and I didn't mention it, but I have been making Podfic for almost 6 years. It'll be 6 years in January, and started making Podfic specifically for Good Omens right about last May. What do you know? Might have been June. I didn't actually manage to watch the show until a week or so after it was out. And with that, I think we should just dive into our outline.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we meant to start with just, so what is Podfic and how do you find it, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I have noticed that I didn't actually launch the poll. I have done so. So the Podfic is the accepted term among people who make Podfic for fanfic as an audiobook format that you can listen to while you're driving or washing the dishes. Or
Gardening. I always hear them while gardening.
That's a good one. I in normal life have about 2 hours a day I spend driving to and from work. So I listen to lots of Podfic then. Being at home all the time has changed that somewhat.
So how do you find Podfic? Like when you want to listen to a story, how do you go about finding that?
Well, because I am not all that picky about what the story is, and I have lots of fandoms, I tend to go to AO3 and click on the Podfic tag and just see what's new. It could be anything. And I've found all sorts of interesting new Podfickers to listen to and new fandoms to enjoy by listening to things that people I know have made. But if you're interested in a specific fandom, of course, you can go to that fandom and sort and filter on the Podfic tag. You can also just sort of subscribe to Lit or me or anyone else that you come across who makes Podfic and say, something new. What else?
So when you go to AO3 and you find a Podfic, you find a story that you like, and maybe you find it from the story you've already read, because we tend to link it to them if the authors agree with that. Usually what you'll find is you may find a cover, you may find a nice picture, you may find a little bit of text or a summary, but usually you end up with a link to another platform. So, and that is because really we just very plainly can't host audio files on AO3. It doesn't have that capability, unfortunately. So when you do find your Podfic, what you'll find is some shape of link to one of various platforms. All of my stuff is usually on Anchor, which is a podcast platform, really, that then distributes content to various other platforms, such as Spotify. And I find that handy because I publish it in one place and then it just goes everywhere and I don't have to worry about it. So my podfics are usually just, here's a link, listen to the actual content on Anchor, or maybe download it from archive.org.
Yes, mine tend to be, I put them on Google Drive and you can download, or I have a friend who offers hosting. So I also post my podfics to that location and they can be streamed from there. Every single podficker does it differently. And fortunately, there's not a standard because AO3 doesn't host it. We just have to figure out what works for us. So you can either just stream straight from the AO3 link if that's been provided, or you can download it to your device and then it'll fall into iTunes or wherever else you keep your MP3s.
So if I have a story and I want to have a podfic of that, say I'm not a podficker, how do I get that? How do I get someone to read my story?
Well, the easiest way is to ask somebody who happens to have time. But as a podficker, when I'm looking for something to read, I often just find it because I read fanfic all the time, and I'll read something and go, I think I could do a good job with this. This suits me, my voice, my acting capacity, my interests. And then I'll go and I'll say, does this author have a transformative work statement? And if they do, then I just straight up add it to my to-do list, and I get to it when I get to it. I have a to-do list about 8 miles long. If they don't, I'll still add it to the to-do list, but then I make a note that I have to request permission. And maybe when I have time, I do that, and maybe I don't. Sometimes I find something, sometimes I have a challenge that's been presented by the community. Find a podfic or a fic that suits a specific prompt, just like fic writers have prompts. We do too, sometimes, where somebody, look up at the board that I've got above me. I've got a prompt for crossover. So I might go and surf the crossover tag until I find something that looks interesting, and that I think I have time to do. As a sort of very broad estimate, 10,000 words an hour. It's actually slightly less than that, but it's easier to do math with round numbers. I mean to say, less than 10,000 words takes up an hour. But we'll look for, as I said, does it suit me? Does it suit audio? Some things just don't. There's, I look for emotional depth. If it makes me feel something that I think I can share with other people to make them feel something, it connected with me somehow.
That's the same for me. Usually I tend to record fics that make me cry, which happens very rarely. But when I do, you can be pretty certain that I'm going to record it one way or another.
Yeah, I like funny things sometimes, but I very much like the emotional depth for my own catharsis and sharing that with other people too.
I also really, when I pick stories to read, they have to be well written. So I would usually steer clear of the unbettered work, because if it's really hard sometimes when you have a story that is a good plot or good content, but that, you know, there's lots of grammatical issues or something that just makes it hard to read out loud, because while you're reading, you can just sort of skip over and sort of fill in the blanks in your head. When you're reading it out loud, that is not so easy. So you have to actually go over and fix things when you do that.
Yes, very much so. So if I'm looking for, specifically looking to make a podfic for a prompt, I will actually sort by kudos. And that kind of helps to choose things that other people have enjoyed. And I feel like I have a higher chance of also enjoying it. Sometimes, you know, it leaves new things down near the bottom, unfortunately, but I will also sort by age in order to get new stuff.
See, I never get to the point where I actually go to AO3 to find stories. I just have a long list of stuff that I may want to do. Some stuff, I always have at least 2 active projects, one where I'm preparing a large script, one where I'm reading, and ideally one where I'm editing, because sometimes, you know, maybe you have a cold, so you can edit, but you can't actually record. Or you have a hectic week at work, and in the evening when you've been on phone calls all day, you just don't have the voice left to actually go and record, but you can still edit. And the other way around, sometimes you just can't bear staring at the screen and clicking and doing stuff. So I'll go and record for a couple of hours. So I always have sort of this rolling process for my stuff.
Yeah, I try to do the same thing to keep a backlog of stuff that's already recorded. So my voice goes out, I can still edit. The other thing is I can edit in places where I can't record, because, and we'll get into this in a moment, you need less intrusive noise when recording. But if you put headphones on, because the microphone will pick it up. But if you put headphones on, you don't have to hear it while you're editing. So you can edit anywhere. I edited some Podfic in the jury selection waiting room in the courthouse one time when I had jury duty. I can do that anywhere.
weirdest location for editing for me, on a ferry between the UK and Ireland.
Yeah. I've done it on airplanes too. It's
right. So maybe we should get into, because I think, we've already got a couple of questions that sort of go into how do you actually make these things. So maybe we should move on to that.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Shall we start with sort of tech setup, which seems to be where the natural flow of where we're just coming from? So for me, I have an actual recording room, which sounds way more fancy than it is. It's just a bedroom that is usually a bedroom with no bed in it, but lots of storage space. So it's sort of full of shelving. And on one of those shelves will be my little age-old MacBook and a stationary microphone. The room doesn't have a seat. So everything that I record standing up in the middle of a room. And by now I have a fairly, I won't say elaborate, but I have a good setup that sort of minimizes background noise. I have like a pop filter and a sort of microphone stand that the microphone doesn't have as much echo to it. But when I started recording my first 10 podfics or so, I actually recorded on my old dictaphone.
Right. And I recorded for the first couple, I just had a microphone headset basically for telephone calls that I plugged into my laptop and used that. I now have a rather nice microphone, but it is not essential. I have recorded several podfic not even that long ago, sitting in my car in a parking lot on my cell phone. And surprisingly enough, the sound isn't bad, because the non-intuitive thing is that the better the microphone, the more background noise it will also pick up. So if you use a phone that's already like a phone is intentionally excluding background noise, so it can actually make quite good sound. And then their software, if you have a MacBook, it comes with GarageBand, which I used for years and is quite sufficient to do the job, but I use Audacity mostly now because it has more ability. The learning curve was higher, so I put it off for a long time, but I've gradually picked up more and more about it, and now pretty much work entirely in Audacity, which is also free, but you have to download it and install it yourself.
Yeah, I've only ever used Audacity, so I don't know any other software, but I've also always been happy with it. So I find it fairly intuitive. And there's the good thing about Audacity is there's a big community around it. There's lots of tutorials, there's lots of YouTube stuff that just shows you how to do specific things. There's lots of plugins that help you. Like I have one that I use one that sort of filters out the mouth clicks that you inevitably have when you record. And
I love that. Yes, that thing is amazing.
That halved my editing time straight up, because I don't have to fiddle about with like tiny little clicks. And that helps a lot. I think we have a couple of questions that we might pick up on at this stage. Let me just quickly see. Do you use special recording equipment? I think we've sorted that one.
I think so.
Where do you look for an author statement? Going back a tiny little bit.
Yeah, I answered that one in the answers on Ineffable, but basically we start in the AO3 profile because that's where the fics are. But there's sometimes our links out to somebody has a dream with, or they have a Tumblr. So we'll look, at least will follow that link if I don't find it on the profile. Yeah. But if it's on the profile, it's right there.
All right. And then I have one that I think is just really where we're at now is how long is it too long a fic to make into Podfic? But I think the question is, how long does it take to make them?
There's two possible questions. Yeah. If it takes anywhere from 3 to infinity times the length of the actual finished recording. Because you record it, so you've got to read through it the once, and then you got to at least listen through it one full time to edit it. And then you might I don't know how many times I listen to the same 15 seconds sometimes just to get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you said earlier that for you, you record under 10,000 words in an hour. I record pretty much 100 words per minute. So my default, if I stand up for an hour to record, I will record roughly 6,000 words. And that usually ends up being, depending on how exhausted I am. So when I record early in the morning, I am way more fluent and I make way less mistakes than when I record in the evening. So the fitter I am, the less mistakes I make, the quicker things are to edit, obviously, because you don't have to repeat the same thing over and over and over again. And also you don't have to cut that out in the end. So for me, on a good day, I record about 6,000 words per hour. And if it's a straight up recording with no additional effects or extra voices or anything, so something that I can just record and edit in one go, that'll take me about twice the time to edit, and then it'll be about 45 minutes long-ish.
Okay. I was actually talking about finished length, which for me averages at about 140 words per minute. If it was 150, it would be 10,000 words an hour. But so it's just easier math. So I can look at a 10K fic and go, okay, that's an hour's worth of Podfic. It's actually 9,600 and some.
How do you deal, because we have a question for that, when you use different voices, do you record all of one voice at a time and then the other voices and then edit them together?
Usually not. I usually read start to finish straight through and just change my voice as I come to a new character. But I have done it the other way once when I had a voice that I couldn't be consistent with. Every time I would come to that character's voice, it would be different. I was like, fine. And I just read it. I read the whole fic, and then I read all of his voice and slotted the pieces in where they belonged.
Yeah. I do that slightly differently. So for my narration as a Raphael Crowley, I do all of that in one go. Like I have these just, they're always there at the tip of my fingers. When I do longer things, so I've done a couple of long series. So the last one that is just finishing to publish at the end of October will be over 10 hours long. And that sort of thing, especially when you have characters that appear in chapter 1 and then chapter 8 and then chapter 15, my problem recording that is that I just simply don't remember how they're supposed to sound. So if I use them a lot, I will just come up with a voice or an accent or something that makes them distinct and record it in one go. But if they're sort of interspersed, it is way easier for me to just stick to that voice, record all of the lines for that one character, and then slot it in afterwards.
And I had that happen, excuse me, with a long fic that I posted earlier this year as I was doing it one chapter a month. So what I did for that one is the first time I made up a voice for somebody, I saved it in another file with like one sentence of them saying something. And then when they'd come along in another chapter, I'd open that other file and play that one sentence to myself and reconsider how that voice had been made and just do it. But I don't do, so this actually comes into some other people's questions. I don't do accents as a rule, unless it's something that is an accent I have at one point in my life had. And I figure you get the voice you get. If you don't like it, I don't care. You know, I don't see a lot of criticism about that. There are a few people who are particular that they want UK voices for UK-based fandoms. I'm not going to be able to be the podficker they want. They'll just have to find someone else to listen to. There are plenty of people doing this. But most people would rather hear the story than not, and they're going to be okay. I've spent most of my podficking career doing British fandoms. I started in Harry Potter. I've been in Good Omens. So I'm an American, you can tell that. I spent a couple of years in the UK, but it's been 30 years ago and it doesn't stay in my voice.
Well, I tend not to do accents, not because I have anything against them. I'm just not very good at them.
Exactly.
I had one, and I can't necessarily do them consistently. I recorded one fic that just required a Scottish accent because that was a core part of the story. And I couldn't for the life of me make it work. So I had a friend of mine who could do a very decent Scottish accent, record all of the lines for me. And then I just essentially copied that in my own voice. It's possible. It was painful. I'm not planning on doing it again. I am planning on actually taking some proper training and learning how to do accents better, because I think you can modulate your voice in pitch or in speed or in different other ways that make voices distinct. But some of the podfics I make have like 40 different characters. And that is a challenge. And being able to do that in accents, especially if some of the characters are like American, it's so much easier to do them in accent and still have them distinct. And you don't need so much vocal variety otherwise if you can do accents. So I'd like to do it more. I just need to actually go away and learn it.
Yeah, and I can do a few. They're all basically American, you know.
I think we've got
I grew up in the North. I lived in the South. I currently live in the Midwest. I can move around America with accents somewhat, but I'm not I can't do a convincing British accent, so I don't try any of them, and I know there are a lot.
The funny thing is, I am native German. I've been in the UK for 10 years, and I hope that I've gotten rid of most of this very strong German accent, which I can't even imitate, and I don't want to try because I hate it so much. But in theory, you'd think it should be easier, but I mostly struggle to just keep my English British and have that consistent. I think we've got a couple more questions. One that I would really like to pick up, if that's okay, is a clarification on the earlier one. Are there some fics that are just too long for podficking? And the answer is no. You might just need, you will need a lot of time, and you might just need more variety. The biggest project that I've been involved in, technically am leading, is a full recording of the Crown of Thorns verse, which is 275,000 words. We expect the final product to be somewhere between 45 hours of finished audio. And we're doing that with a huge team. I sort of looked at it and thought this would be worth podficking. This is a really nice story, but it has 80 different characters, and I just absolutely cannot do that on my own. And that's when you get to multi-voice projects.
Oh yes, which are an entirely even more fun thing. There are podfickers out there in the world who have done 45-hour podfics all on their own. Rena Jenkins is one. She's mostly in the Star Wars fandom, but she has a podfic that is like 50 hours long. I don't know how she did it, but she did. And for me, the longest thing I've done so far is about 70K, but I have 2 projects I'm starting up this fall that are both going to be in approximately that length and possibly longer. And I have one that I have permission for, but she told me to wait until it was finished because she was going to to go back and edit it, which is in the range of 150. So there aren't any that are too short either, in case that question was going to come up. I have seen podfics out there in the world that are less than a minute long. I have podficked a drabble or two myself. Those are amazing because you can do them in 10 minutes or a 10-minute podfic in less than an hour. I'm going to do something and I'm going to post it today and it's going to be done.
Yeah. I do a series of crack fics that come from a weekly competition on my home Discord server. And I just podfic the winner every week. And usually, you know, but in theory, you have a limit of works to be no longer than 500 words, but obviously they're all 2,000 or more. And I record this every week, and I usually record and edit and post in the space of an hour because ultimately they are fairly short, but they're also really fun. And there's always something different. And when I started these, I hadn't even read the fic before I recorded it. I just recorded it blindly when I've read it the first time round. We have another question on preparation. How much planning do you do before recording? Is there anything you need to think about before hitting record? How's that for you? Because I have a very elaborate answer.
It has become less and less and less. It depends on the fandom and the characters in the fic and how much, you know, how well I am acquainted with it. So if it's a fandom with which I have made many, many podfics in, and I already have sort of an established set of voices for, I read them cold as often as not. Just, I've read the fic once, I liked it, I put it on my to-do list, and I come back to it 6 months later and I just do it. Other time, and I have actually read things completely cold because I trust the author or because that was part of the challenge and I just did it. But no, I don't print a script. I don't mark it up. I just do it. But now I have fallen into a Chinese drama fandom and I'm having to do an awful lot of prep for that because I have to learn every character's name and how it's pronounced and lots of the Chinese words that get thrown in there. So that's being a change to my process.
For me, it's slightly different. I tend to work with scripts, if for the single reason that, so in the past, I've done a lot of fics, I've recorded a lot of fics from Drawlight, who has since deleted his account. So you can't actually find the text anymore.
Yeah.
And I find it, for everything that I read, I at least save the raw text. So I have a copy of it. So that's my basic script. And that's also easier to copy paste like tags and stuff when I post stuff on AO3. When it only has narration as a Raphael Crowley, I don't do anything else with them. I just have the text and I read it. If it's longer than, say, 10K, I script it in a bit more detail and sort of color code the characters, just so because I know I can't record that in one go. And as soon as it's over 6,000 words, for me, that's like I have to make sure where I cut it, and that usually requires a script. For more elaborate things, so I've just started on a huge new thing that is in total, I think 350,000 words or something, and that is a 650-page script with, so far as I can tell, at least 50 characters. And as I said earlier, I need to record these characters one by one so they stay consistent throughout the fic. So I have to go in and code every single one of them with like different styles so that I can then export all of them to a separate file so that I can then have one list of all of the lines that Gabriel says over the course of these 600 pages. So the longer the fic, the more elaborate the preparation.
Right. And then the other thing that kind of touches on is multi-voices. Yeah. So for a multi-voice podfic, there has to be a script because you have to figure out who's going to read what and then assign them each the roles, or what tends to happen is people assign themselves as often as not. But it's, you know, the more people involved, the more time involved, the more characters involved, like you said, the more prep is necessary.
Yeah. Also, one thing for me that I tend to do, because I'm not a native English speaker, I live on forvo.com, which is a site where you plug in a word and it tells you, hopefully, how it is pronounced. And I think I'm using it less and less as I'm learning more and more. I've been in the UK for 10 years, so I'm pretty fluent and I write shitloads in English professionally. But writing is not the same as speaking, and you can totally know how to use a word and how to spell it without being able to pronounce it at all. So I do a lot of just making sure that I have the right pronunciation. And even with doing that, sometimes it goes wrong.
Yeah, and I'm looking back at the chat and I see a question I think I'm going to back up to for a second. Someone asked about, struggling with making their voices distinct. And an alternative that you have, and you might not realize that you have this, is to modify the fic, to add those dialogue tags back in. With blanket permission, most of us just assume that includes minor edits along the way. If, fic writers are a little more fussy, a lot of them will even say, make whatever changes you need to make this flow for a podfic. But you can go back and say, hey, I want to podfic your fic, but I feel like it needs dialogue tags in order to me to be able to do it justice. Most people are just going to say, yeah, whatever, do what you need to do. So that is an option as well, to add them in. If there's a long string of dialogue and you can't keep the characters distinct without the tags, put them in.
Yeah, I've never come across an author where I podficked the story and they afterward complained. Like, I've never seen that happen.
Never. I don't even, when I'm editing, I don't even look back at the raw text. I just listen to it. If it sounds good, it's good.
Yeah.
Unless there's a few places where I'm like, I might have read this twice because it's actually twice in the original fic. It wasn't a retake, it was intentional. And I'll go back and I'll look and say, oh yeah, they did do that, and leave it in. But most of the time I don't follow along word by word.
Tend to do that, but then I also edit a lot of Crown of Thorns where we are really to the dot, where everything has to match up.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the project.
It does. We have more questions. I think at this point we can safely say that we won't get around to actually reading anything for you.
No, it doesn't look like it.
But that's great, because I'd much rather answer questions and engage with you all. How do you work up the courage to ask permission to podfic for authors without a blanket permission statement?
This is a question I see a lot on like the Podfic Discord, which if you go all the way back to the top of the chat, there's an invite in that document I shared. At this point, I really don't, I just do it. But I can remember it being a big deal back at the beginning. And it's like anything else. It just, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And a lot of people have little scripts that they cut and paste into their emails or AO3 comments or wherever you find to communicate with an author, which is also sometimes a challenge. I tend to just go, I really love this fic. Can I podfic it?
Yeah. That's what I do. That's what I did from day one. And usually I say, I sort of make the request along with a compliment, because I would comment anyway and say, oh my God, this is an amazing story. Thank you for sharing it. And it's really easy to just tag on a, do you mind if I read it at the end?
Right.
Although
but back
now,
at the beginning, I was sending emails going, this is what Podfic is, and I want to do it. And here's where you can go to listen to my Podfics if you don't want to. Don't get any of that. Just say, hey, can I Podfic this? I have had exactly one person say no, ever.
I don't think I've ever had a straight up no.
Yeah. I have gotten some people not respond.
Yes.
And I take that as a no, because my to-do list is plenty long anyway.
Yeah, I on my to-do list, I have like different categories on which stages pods are at. And one of them is I've asked for consent, but I don't have it. And then
Right.
the next is I now have consent, I need to go away and prepare the text. So
Yeah.
and I work my way through those stages on any number of pods I have open at any one time.
And someone has asked whether we feel this is more acting than reading. And yeah, I have been known to call myself a voice actor in public, even though I don't do it professionally.
I tend to agree with that. When I started making Podfic, I didn't consider it to be a form of art. I thought it was a very mechanic process. You have a fic, you read it, you edit it, you publish it, and there's no more to it. That's how I started. And by now, I'm pretty convinced that it is definitely an art form, because by the way you perform the story, you add to it. You give it life, you give it feeling, you give it emotion. And you add to the original story. After you've read it, it's not just a fic anymore. And a good deal of that is acting.
Kind of tags into something we didn't put in our outline, which I've thought of it as repods. So multiple people podfic the same story. They are not the same artwork. You can listen to each of them and get an entirely different effect. I think, in fact, we have repotted the same Drawlight story at some point or other.
That happens with Drawlight stories.
It does. It really does. But you listen to each one and get a completely different aspect on the story. I've had authors come back and go, I didn't realize my story meant that, or could mean that. It doesn't say that I have made a definitive statement about what their story means either, but I have made a statement, and it's different from what they had in mind, but they also appreciated it.
The most common feedback I've got from authors was, oh my God, I didn't realize just how filthy this story was.
I've also gotten, wow, I didn't realize I had made people so emotional,
Yeah. I've recently done one from Soft October called Heaven is a Place on Earth, which was one of those ones straight up. It made me cry so much I had to record it. And I spoke to the author on Tumblr to ask permission and just to chat about the story, and was like, and they were really impressed just how much of an impression this story had made on me and on other people. And they were surprised, and I was like, oh my God, this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. So yeah, you get, actually part of the joy of making Podfic is having these different impressions and having the exchange with both the authors and with the audience. Although I would say from experience, Podfic tend to get a lot less feedback than writing.
We spend so much time talking about that on the Discord. But the other thing that is, if you're interested in doing Podfic, do follow the invite link. And if it expires, let me know, I'll get another. Because the Podficer community will listen to your Podfics. It doesn't matter if it's the fandom they're in or not. They don't care. I said at the very beginning, I keep Podfic as a favorite tag, and I just go through it every few weeks and see what's new. What's new from people I like, what's new from fandoms I like, what's short that what will fit in my commute, and I just listen to something.
We have one last question, I think. What's your opinion on sound effects in podfics? Do you use them? Do you hear them often in other people's podfics? Do you think they're useful to listeners?
It depends on the story, doesn't it? Or the project. Sometimes I put them in, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I put music in, musical interludes between scenes, sometimes I don't. I think they can be useful. I did a fully soundscaped radio play, multi-voice of a modern retelling of Hamlet. It's the first multi-voice I ever made, and it had like 14 characters and full soundscape. I am a jump in the deep end kind of person. I jump in the deep end of everything. My first podfic was over an hour long. My first multi-voice was this massive Hamlet project. And for that, the soundscaping was necessary because you had to know what was going on, and the dialogue there was no narration at all. So it was kind of necessary. But in other cases, it's like some people feel like they should release podfics without sound effects. Like if they put sound effects in, they also do a non-sound version, because there are people who have auditory processing issues, and too much underlying the voice can make it hard for those people to process. But if you don't feel that suits the particular work you're trying to create, then you create the work you want to make.
Yeah, it's similar for me. I think I've done sound effects exactly once for like a Star Trek crossover that just needed like the swooshing of the doors and everything to bring it to life.
Right.
But that was also entirely dialogue based. So if all you have is like a series of recordings similar to the Magnus archives, in sort of style, then it makes sense to use them, because it makes it easier to follow the story. But
right.
I think if you use any sort of audio, even music, I think it's good when you don't notice it so much.
Yeah.
And if you can stick to that, it doesn't really matter whether you use them or not.
Yeah, they need to be more subtle than you think most of the time. So I just keep the volume really low on the effects and the music. I think we have actually answered all of the questions except the one about filtering mouth clicks, which is easier answered by, I will put a link in the shared document when we get out of here, and it will update itself when you look at it.
Yeah, it's called the declicker. It's
yeah, it's great, but you need the Audacity forum link to find it, and I have it saved somewhere. I'll put it in the doc.
Yeah, I think we've essentially covered pretty much everything we meant to talk about.
I think so.
I think that the last thing to say is, and Fiona referred to that earlier, there is a Podfic community that is very welcoming. I personally haven't really engaged in it because I'm a single fandom person. I've only ever done Good Omens. Good Omens is my first and only fandom. I don't really have an interest in going anywhere else. And so my home is the Good Omens community, not the Podfic community.
Right.
But even so, the community is really supportive and is really lovely to be involved in, because they're also positive about it.
Yeah. If you even like to listen to Podfic, join the community and you will get all the recs you could possibly ever want. And if you're interested in starting, we really, really love helping newbies. It's the favorite thing.
Yeah, and if you have any direct questions or anything else, you're obviously welcome to ping either of us a message as well. If you're shy about just joining a new Discord server or going public, I'm certainly more than happy to respond to questions, and my DMs everywhere are pretty much open, so you can always get a hold of me,
right,
wherever I am.
Okay, so I am looking at the handout right now. Somebody asked about the Audacity declicker. All right, I will get that link and add it in a minute.
Yeah.
Did we actually put our contact information in here? It doesn't look like we did.
We can drop it in there.
Yeah. We'll put it.
I'll send it over. You can drop it in there. Awesome.
Thank you all for being so engaged and engaging, and this has been fun.
It has. Thank you all, and I hope we'll hear each other in the future.
Yeah.